The briefing tent was half buried in desert dust, the canvas flapping faintly in the wind. The soldiers inside leaned forward on folding chairs, some rubbing the sweat from their brows, all squinting at the general as he stepped onto the small wooden platform. General Kincaid was a mountain of a man, his uniform immaculate despite the dust clinging to the boots of every soldier around him. His eyes, icy and unreadable, scanned the room like a predator sizing up prey. On the table beside him lay a large map, crisscrossed with lines and red markings. "This is our target," he said, gesturing to a cluster of jagged mountain ridges. "Deep inside, well fortified. They've got snipers, tripwires, and surveillance. They've also got civilians, so collateral damage is a concern. Every step we take has to be precise." He let his gaze sweep across the room. 36 men and women sat stiffly, some shifting uneasily, all weighing the enormity of what he had just outlined. Silence followed him like a shadow. Then he leaned forward, voice dropping just enough to make everyone strain. "We need one sniper, one shot, one chance. Who volunteers?" The room went still, absolutely still. Every head turned toward one another, eyes darting nervously, measuring courage against experience, recklessness against survival. None of the senior snipers even twitched. They had seen missions go wrong before. They had seen young soldiers go in and never return. They knew this was practically a death sentence. Not even a whisper came from the back row. Not even the cadets who had been restless an hour before. Not a single hand rose. And then, soft and unassuming, came a voice, barely above the hum of the overhead fans. "I'll go." The words were simple, almost shy, but the weight of them struck like a hammer. Heads turned sharply. Some soldiers blinked, thinking they had misheard. Some leaned in, straining to catch the speaker. It was Staff Sergeant Lena Ward. Quiet, reserved, the type who never volunteered for anything and spoke only when necessary. Lena had been in the field long enough to earn a reputation for deadly precision, but also for disappearing from the spotlight. She didn't crave attention. She didn't care about accolades. Yet here she was, her calm, brown eyes meeting the general's icy stare, unwavering. General Kincaid didn't flinch, but the faint tightening of his jaw betrayed him. "Ward, you understand the risk?" he asked. The room held its breath. Every soldier there knew the answer would determine not just the mission, but possibly her life. She nodded once, not an exaggerated nod, not a hesitant one, simple, controlled, certain. He exhaled slowly. "Then gear up, wheels up in 30. The order echoed like a gunshot through the tent. Lena gathered her things with mechanical precision, checking her rifle, smoothing her gloves, adjusting the strap of her pack. She didn't glance around at the others, didn't meet their eyes, but she could feel them. The whispered doubts, the awe, the disbelief. None of them could believe she'd volunteer. None of them believed she'd come back. Outside, the desert wind whipped around the tents, carrying grit and the distant hum of helicopters warming up. Lena walked past rows of soldiers who stared at her in silence, some with open mouths, some shaking their heads, and some with admiration that was quietly, almost reluctantly, forming in their eyes. She didn't acknowledge any of it. She had no time for thoughts beyond the target. The helicopter would pick her up at the southern ridge, and she had a 2-kilometer hike from the drop zone to the actual sniper perch. She went over her mental checklist for the third time that morning. Wind direction, elevation, target markers, distance. 2,000 meters. Impossible. A single miscalculation would be fatal. The briefing room emptied. The hum of the tent returned to normal. Soldiers whispered to one another, some questioning the sanity of the mission, some admiring Lena's courage. One of the younger snipers, barely out of training, muttered, "She's crazy, right?" His squad mate shook his head slowly. "She's not crazy. She's different. She doesn't think like the rest of us." By the time Lena reached the helicopter, the desert sun had begun to climb higher, washing everything in blinding white. The blades whirred overhead, dust swirling in furious mini-tornadoes across the landing pad. She climbed in without looking back, strapping herself in beside the pilot. Her rifle lay across her lap, scope glinting in the sunlight. The cockpit smelled of fuel, sweat, and anticipation. "First time on a live sniper mission?" the pilot asked casually, though his eyes lingered on her. Lena didn't answer immediately. She thought back to every mission she had ever been on, every shot she had taken, every life she had failed to save despite her best efforts. Her jaw tightened, her gaze forward, out of the helicopter window toward the ridge that would soon be her battlefield. "No," she said finally, voice quiet but firm. "But first time counts the same as any other." The helicopter lifted off, slicing through the desert sky. Dust swirled below, kicking up like a storm chasing the rotor blades. She watched the horizon shift, mountains growing larger, more menacing. The general's words echoed in her mind. One shot, one chance. The terrain ahead was treacherous. Sharp cliffs, hidden crevices, unpredictable winds that could throw even the best shot off by several feet. Lena's eyes scanned the landscape, memorizing patterns, ridges, and shadows. A single miscalculation and the mission was over before it began. "Command," she whispered into her earpiece almost automatically. "Ward en route to target zone, ETA 10 minutes. Static, no response. The lack of confirmation wasn't unusual at this stage of the operation, but it was enough to make her mind focus sharper. Every mission demanded attention to detail, but this one demanded perfection. The helicopter dipped toward the ridge drop point. Lena's knuckles whitened on the rifle's stock. She checked the wind meter on her scope. Conditions were unpredictable but within acceptable margins. The approach would be tight, timing would be crucial. The pilot eased the helicopter down to the landing zone and Lena's boots touched the ground. Sand slipped beneath her soles. The canyon opened before her, a jagged maw of rock and shadow, hiding unknown threats. She began her climb immediately, methodical, deliberate. One misstep could mean death, but hesitation was worse. From behind, the remaining soldiers watched her ascend the ridge in silence. Some of them had seen combat, had faced impossible odds, but none of them had moved like this. Calm, quiet, purposeful. She wasn't a blur. She wasn't frantic. She was a storm contained in human form, and it was terrifying to watch. As she moved higher, the wind picked up, carrying dust and grit into her eyes. She squinted, hands shielding her face. The map in her mind unfolded. The enemy's stronghold perched like a dark jewel across the ridge. Somewhere in there, heavily armed and unaware, was the target. She would have to take the shot from extreme range, through shifting winds, across jagged terrain. The first signs of enemy activity appeared, a glint of metal far across the valley. Lena froze instinctively, eyes narrowing. She had been trained for this. She knew to measure the angle, estimate distance, and account for atmospheric distortions. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment when she realized she was utterly alone. No spotter, no backup, no immediate support. Her heart didn't race, not yet. But the weight of the mission pressed down like the desert sun overhead. Lena adjusted her grip on the rifle, scanning the ridge. Somewhere out there, someone was watching. Somewhere, the fate of this mission, and perhaps her life, was about to be decided. The wind howled louder. The helicopter's rotors faded behind her. Lena paused, crouched behind a jagged rock, eyes locked on the target zone. Her mind ran through the calculations one last time. Then she exhaled and stepped forward into the unknown. Because in the silence of the desert, one quiet woman had volunteered, and no one could predict what she was about to do. The soldiers behind her whispered. No one dared say it aloud. She might be the only one to come back. The helicopter had long faded from view, the dust settling back into the desert like sand returning to its rightful place. Lena crouched behind a jagged rock, the coarse grains grinding into her palms as she checked the wind meter on her rifle again. 2,000 meters. The distance was daunting but not impossible. Precision would be her ally, and precision required patience. She moved forward slowly, each step measured, deliberate. Every loose stone threatened to betray her position. Her mind flickered to the briefing, the general's words, the faces of the soldiers watching her ascend. She ignored them now. She couldn't rely on anyone but herself. Ahead, the ridge loomed like a beast in silhouette. Jagged and uneven, it was the kind of terrain that swallowed the careless whole, and in its shadow the enemy awaited. Somewhere out there, snipers were already scanning the ridges, waiting for a pulse that wasn't theirs. Lena adjusted her scope, verifying every environmental factor she could measure: wind, elevation, humidity, temperature. These were the numbers she understood, numbers she could control. The unknown, human instinct, unpredictability, chance, was the part she had no mastery over. A faint noise echoed across the canyon, a shift in the rocks, a whistle of air across metal. Lena froze. Her pulse was steady, her breathing controlled, every muscle poised like a coiled spring. She waited, scanning, but saw nothing. The wind carried a fine layer of dust across her eyes, blurring the sharp edges of the ridges. "Command," she whispered into her earpiece almost reflexively. "Ward en route to sniper position. ETA 5 minutes." Nothing static. It wasn't unusual at this stage. The mission had gone dark before, leaving her on her own for critical moments. But now she felt it, the awareness of isolation pressing against her like the desert heat. She was a solitary figure against a jagged horizon. Every instinct screamed alert, every nerve on edge. Then movement, a glint, a shimmer of light far across the ridge. Lena froze, heart still steady, eyes narrowing. It could be nothing. Sunlight caught the edge of a metal object, a piece of reflective glass, a scope, a weapon. But her instincts were precise. She had learned over 14 years to trust the small signs, the flickers, the glimmers, the faint shifts in shadow. She adjusted her position, careful not to make a sound, each movement measured against the threat that lurked. The glimmer remained, flickering intermittently as if teasing her attention. She knew what it meant. The enemy had noticed her, or perhaps had been waiting. She pressed herself lower against the rock, heart calm, eyes scanning. The sun was a harsh glare above, but shadows crept across the canyon floor. Every movement could betray her. Every misstep could be her last. The wind shifted suddenly, buffeting her face and whipping dust into her eyes. Lena blinked rapidly, recalibrating. Her scope was steady, the rifle weighted evenly in her hands. She had to be patient. Wait, observe, calculate. The shot would come, not now, but when the conditions aligned perfectly. A soft, muffled sound caught her attention, an almost imperceptible crunch of gravel. She froze again. There it was, a movement, slow, deliberate, not far from her but unseen. Someone was approaching. Her training kicked in immediately. She crouched, moved behind a larger boulder and scanned the terrain from a hidden angle. The figure was fleeting, almost imperceptible before vanishing behind the rocks. Lena's pulse didn't quicken. Her mind was already calculating escape routes, firing positions, vantage points. Then came the realization: she wasn't alone. A second glimmer appeared, this time closer, more deliberate. Someone else had eyes on her, a sniper, a real one, patient, experienced, and the proximity meant the threat was immediate. She pressed herself lower, the rock cutting into her palms, her gloves providing little protection against the abrasions. Every sense screamed alert. Every breath was controlled. One mistake and this mission would end before it truly began. The enemy had the advantage of height, a clear line of sight, and the element of surprise. Lena didn't panic. Panic was the enemy of precision. She adjusted her position incrementally, inching along the ridge, using natural cover, measuring every movement against the shifting terrain. Her eyes flicked across the canyon floor, noting patterns, shadows that didn't match the sun, reflections that didn't align with rocks, movements that were too precise to be natural. The enemy was coordinating, calculating, adapting, and so was she. The first shot had to be perfect. There would be no second chance. She repositioned, setting the bipod, stabilizing her breathing. Every calculation ran through her mind. Wind velocity, distance, drop, mirage effect, target movement. The desert was merciless, the terrain unforgiving, and the stakes immeasurable. She felt it then, a subtle shift behind her, a whisper of movement across the ridge. Lena didn't turn. She didn't need to. Years of field experience told her where danger lurked, even when unseen. Her finger hovered over the trigger, eyes locked on the target. The glimmer appeared again, a tiny reflection from metal, just enough to betray the sniper's presence. She adjusted the crosshairs slightly, factoring in the unpredictable wind gusts. Time slowed. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Every instinct screamed caution, every muscle tensed in anticipation. And then silence. Too perfect, too still. Something wasn't right. Her instincts screamed, movement from behind, quick, precise, almost silent. The enemy had circled. She wasn't just facing a sniper in front of her, she was being hunted from multiple directions. Lena's mind raced, cataloging options, escape routes, firing positions. The mountain offered few advantages and the wind carried sound in unpredictable ways. Any sudden movement could betray her location. Yet she couldn't wait. Waiting meant being trapped. She exhaled, slow, controlled, steadying her heartbeat. One shot, one chance, this was what she had trained for. But as she repositioned her rifle and readied herself, a new concern entered her mind. How many more were out there? How many more shadows moved unseen across the canyon? The wind gusted again, carrying fine sand into her face. She wiped it away with the back of her glove and scanned the terrain once more. Her rifle was steady, her scope adjusted. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. And then from her earpiece, a crackle. "Ward, movement behind you." The voice was fragmented, distorted by static, but the message was clear. Someone had tracked her. Someone was closing in. She froze, calculating, weighing options. Turn and face the threat. Risk revealing her position. Crawl forward, continue to the target. Risk being flanked. Fire a warning shot. Risk revealing her precise location. She pressed herself closer to the rock, heart calm but adrenaline surging. The desert seemed alive with the silent pulse of danger, the hidden movement of hunters against the hunted. Every instinct told her that this mission was no longer just about precision. It was about survival. Lena adjusted her scope, scanning the ridge ahead, then the canyon below. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, reading every shadow, every glint, every subtle change in the landscape. She was ready. She was trained. She was alone. But she was not unprepared. The glimmer appeared again, nearer now. A reflection off metal unmistakable. The enemy sniper had repositioned. He was waiting, watching, calculating. And Lena knew without a doubt that the first shot fired in this canyon would determine everything. Her pulse slowed, her breath controlled, her mind clear. She had come this far. She would not falter. And then something impossible. Another glimmer, moving across her periphery, not the sniper. Something or someone else was closing in. Lena's eyes widened. She realized the true danger. She wasn't hunting the enemy. She was being hunted. And in the silent expanse of the canyon, with the wind screaming across the ridges, Lena knew this was just the beginning. The mountain held secrets, and she was about to uncover the first one. The canyon was silent, save for the whistle of the wind against rock and the faint crunch of sand under Lena's boots. She crouched low, rifle resting on a jagged ledge, scope trained on the distant glimmer that had first caught her eye. Every fiber in her body screamed alert. The enemy had eyes on her, and she knew instinctively that they were no ordinary fighters. These were trained snipers, patient and deadly. She pressed herself closer to the rock, letting it shield her from the glare of the sun. Every movement had to be calculated. One slip, one loose stone, and the enemy would know her exact position. She couldn't rely on her earpiece. Command had gone silent, likely jamming signals or engaging counter-surveillance measures. She was on her own. Her mind raced through possibilities. If she moved forward, she risked exposure. If she stayed put, the enemy could pin her in place. But Lena had never relied on luck, only skill. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat had to be deliberate. She raised her rifle slightly and focused on the glimmer again. It was subtle, a faint reflection from metal. But she knew what it was, a scope. Someone had her in their sights. "Focus," she muttered under her breath. Adjusting the bipod, she steadied her rifle, measuring wind velocity, mirage effects, and drop distance. 2,000 meters was long enough to test even the best sniper's patience, but Lena was no ordinary sniper. Her training, experience, and instinct merged into a single clarity of purpose. Then another movement, a faint rustle behind a ridge on her right. She froze, eyes darting, rifle ready. Not just one threat then, multiple, they were coordinating. Her breathing slowed. She needed to be invisible. She slid along the ledge, feet finding tiny crevices in the rock. The glimmer flickered again. The enemy sniper had repositioned. Lena's fingers tightened around the stock, pulse steady. She calculated the angle twice, thrice. The slightest misjudgment could send the bullet inches off course, wasting her one and only chance. But before she could take the shot, a sharp movement to her left made her spin instinctively. A second glimmer, a flash from a second scope, caught the sun. Two snipers, coordinated. She didn't hesitate. The first shot had to disable the nearest threat before the second could react. Lena adjusted her aim 6 inches high to compensate for mirage distortion, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked once, echoing across the canyon. The first sniper jerked violently, dropping behind a boulder as a plume of dust erupted around him. Lena didn't relax. The second sniper had already fired. The shot tore past her cheek, a whisper of death. She rolled instinctively behind cover, the jagged rock scraping her gloves, sending tiny cuts across her palms. The sand underfoot shifted. Another crack and another near miss. She had to move. Waiting meant death. Sliding along the ridge, she recalculated positions, scanning the terrain for the perfect vantage point. The first sniper, injured but alive, repositioned. The second was seeking higher ground, anticipating her movement. Lena's mind worked in overdrive, tracking their patterns, predicting their actions, adjusting her own. The wind howled, carrying sand and debris, masking her movements. Lena crawled forward, each inch deliberate, each movement deliberate. She found a narrow ledge with enough stability to take a long shot. Kneeling, she reoriented her rifle, scope aligning perfectly. Her first target, the sniper who had fired at her cheek, peeked from behind the rock. Lena's finger tightened on the trigger. Adjusting for distance, she exhaled and fired. The rifle cracked, the bullet tracing a deadly arc across the canyon. The enemy's body went limp. Silence fell for a heartbeat, then came the telltale sound of the second sniper shifting. Lena didn't wait. She reloaded with the smooth, practiced movements of someone who had done this countless times. Her mind ran through contingencies, escape routes, alternate firing positions, possible reinforcements. She heard a faint whistle of air, a bullet passing dangerously close. She rolled behind another outcrop, sand spraying around her. Her heart remained steady, but adrenaline sharpened every sense. Every sound, every shadow, every glimmer of light became a data point. The enemy sniper wasn't just hiding. He was trying to outthink her, but Lena had done this before. She could anticipate movements, predict shots, counter maneuvers. Years of quiet operations, of disappearing and reappearing unnoticed, had honed instincts that few could match. A third movement caught her eye, a flash of uniform across the valley. Reinforcements. Another sniper. She couldn't tell. She adjusted her scope, scanning. The angle was perfect for a long shot, but she had to be cautious. Any mistake could compromise the mission and her life. Then she saw it, a shadow flickering unnaturally, moving with calculated precision. Not a civilian, not a careless soldier. A trained fighter stalking her path. Lena's pulse remained steady, her breath controlled. She couldn't waste a second. She repositioned her rifle, calculating wind, drop, distance, mirage distortion. Every variable was in her mind, perfectly measured. The glimmer appeared again, nearer now. She recognized the enemy sniper's movement. It was subtle, deliberate, confident, but not unerring. Lena exhaled slowly, taking a mental snapshot of the angle. She fired. The rifle barked, the sound echoing across the canyon. The enemy shifted, jerking violently as dust and debris exploded from his position. Silence followed, almost too complete. Lena didn't relax. She had learned long ago that silence could mean one of two things: victory or death lurking just beyond sight. Her eyes scanned the terrain, tracking movement, glimmer, shadow. She had disabled the immediate threats, but the mountain had more secrets. She sensed it, unseen eyes watching, calculating, waiting. Every second was a gamble. Every breath could betray her. Every heartbeat could be the last. But Lena's training, her patience, and her lethal precision kept her steady. Then a sound behind her. Soft, almost imperceptible. Footsteps, crunching gravel, shifting rocks. Not a sniper in front, something else, something closing fast. She froze. The canyon's echo magnified the tiniest noise, and Lena's instincts screamed, "This is not part of the mission plan." She pivoted slightly, rifle ready, scanning the ridge behind her. Her eyes caught a shadow slipping between rocks, precise, deliberate, moving toward her position. Not enemy, American, friendly, traitor, she couldn't know, and she had no time to hesitate. Her heartbeat slowed, pulse controlled, finger steady on the trigger. She had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This wasn't just about the snipers now. Someone or something was stalking her from the shadows. She pressed herself closer to the rock, scanning, calculating, anticipating. Every instinct told her that the mission had shifted. What was once a precision strike was now a deadly survival game. And then the voice came, distorted, through the static of her earpiece. "Ward, confirm, movement to your rear." She didn't answer, she didn't need to, she could feel it. The unseen presence, stalking, calculating, closing in. Lena's eyes narrowed, muscles coiled like springs. She was alone, she was hunted, and she was ready. The first shot had been fired. The game had begun, and the canyon held secrets that were just beginning to reveal themselves. The canyon's silence was shattered by the faint but unmistakable crack of gunfire. Lena's first shot had found its mark, but the echoes of the enemy sniper's counterattack reminded her of the precariousness of every movement. She dove behind a jagged boulder, the rock scraping against her gloves and arms, dust filling the air, her heartbeat steady but adrenaline surging. Two snipers were still in play. She had disabled one, but the second was repositioning, calculating angles, waiting for a mistake. Lena knew every second counted. The enemy wasn't just out there, they were anticipating her. The entire ridge was a chessboard, and every rock, shadow, and glimmer of sunlight was a piece in a deadly game. She inched forward, crawling along the ledge, her boots slipping on loose gravel, small pebbles clattering down the mountainside. One misstep and the enemy would zero in on her. Her hands were steady, but the raw physicality of the climb burned her arms. She checked her scope again, adjusting for wind, distance, and mirage effects. 2,000 meters across shifting desert terrain wasn't forgiving, and there would be no margin for error. A glimmer, metal flashing in the sun, appeared again. Lena froze. The sniper had re-emerged, crouched behind a small outcropping, eyes locked on her. She could see the tension in his body, the way he adjusted his scope, the way his hands gripped the weapon like a conductor poised over an orchestra of death. Lena exhaled slowly, heart steady, muscles coiled. The first shot had been perfect, but the second had to be flawless. She shifted slightly, repositioning the bipod, stabilizing her rifle, measuring every angle, every gust of wind. And then she fired. The shot cracked across the canyon, echoing violently against the rock walls. The enemy jerked violently and collapsed behind the rock. Lena didn't exhale immediately. She stayed crouched, scanning, anticipating, ready for the inevitable counterattack. The canyon held more secrets than she had anticipated, and she knew instinctively that more threats could emerge from anywhere. A sudden clatter to her left made her pivot instinctively. Another sniper, or perhaps a scout moving in to flank her position. Lena's mind raced. The mission had already escalated beyond expectations. The enemy wasn't just defending, they were orchestrating a trap. Her rifle clicked as she adjusted for another shot. She had only one clear line of sight left, the rest obscured by jagged rocks and shifting shadows. The wind gusted again, scattering sand and debris across her scope, creating mirages that made distance estimation treacherous. Lena ignored it. Every shot had to be precise. She pressed forward along the ridge, crawling into a narrow ledge that offered a slightly better vantage point. Her boots scraped across loose stone, and she felt the adrenaline tighten every muscle. Every heartbeat was synchronized with the rifle's rhythm, steady, calm, deliberate. Then movement. Across the canyon, a figure was adjusting their position. Lena recognized it immediately. Another sniper, hidden, patient, calculating. The distance was extreme, the angle awkward, but she had no choice. She had to engage or risk being pinned indefinitely. She exhaled, steadying her scope, calculating wind, mirage, and drop. She pressed the trigger. The rifle barked, the shot echoing across the canyon. The figure moved violently, then went still. Lena didn't relax. She had learned early in her career that silence could be a trap in itself, a feint, a warning, or the calm before the storm. Her ears picked up a faint whistling. A bullet tore past her cheek, a whisper of death barely missing her head. She rolled behind the boulder again, dust clouding her vision. Her pulse was steady, heart calm. Every instinct screamed alert, every sense heightened. She crawled forward along a narrow ridge, using the terrain to mask her movements. Every inch was painstaking, every pebble a potential alarm. Her eyes scanned constantly. The glimmer appeared again, a flash from metal, a scope reflecting sunlight. The enemy had repositioned. Lena adjusted her rifle, squeezing the trigger. Another shot echoed, and the sniper shifted violently before disappearing behind a jagged outcrop. The wind howled. Her gloves were torn from abrasion, her knuckles bleeding, but she didn't pause. She had to reach a new vantage point before the enemy could regroup. She moved along the ridge, each step precise, each movement calculated. Then a noise behind her, footsteps fast, coordinated, not the sniper, something larger, a team. Lena froze. Her pulse remained steady, but adrenaline surged in her veins. She scanned quickly, searching for cover. The ridge offered little. One slip, one miscalculation, and she would be exposed to multiple lines of fire. The footsteps grew closer. The enemy was closing in, anticipating her movements, exploiting every advantage. Lena's mind raced through options: retreat, reposition, engage. Each carried immense risk. She pressed herself against the rock, rifle at the ready, calculating. Her target was still out there somewhere, but the hunters were now closing. She had to act quickly. A glimmer just ahead caught her eye. The sniper was preparing another shot, aiming precisely at her current position. She had seconds. She fired. The rifle barked, echoing off the canyon walls. The sniper's body jerked violently. Silence. Too much silence. Lena didn't relax. A new sound reached her ears, a low whistle of movement along the ridge behind her. Not a single sniper. A coordinated approach, more than she had anticipated. Lena pressed herself tighter against the rock. She had to survive, had to reach a position where she could take the shot on the target, but the ridge was a gauntlet. Every movement revealed her, every inch exposed her to death. The canyon stretched endlessly, every shadow a potential threat, every glimmer of sunlight a sniper's reflection. Lena exhaled, steadying her breathing, hands tight on the rifle. She had reached a narrow ledge, offering a slightly higher vantage. Kneeling, she adjusted her scope, scanning. The first sniper had been neutralized, the second displaced, but now the team approaching from behind presented a deadly new challenge. Lena's mind worked rapidly. Escape routes, alternate firing positions, angles, wind, distance, mirage. Every calculation precise. One mistake could end her life. Footsteps faster, closer. Shadows shifting along the canyon walls. The hunters were closing. And Lena realized this wasn't just about precision anymore. This wasn't just a sniper mission. This was survival. She exhaled, steadying her rifle, eyes narrowing. Every instinct told her that she was still in the eye of the storm. The mountain held secrets, and she was about to face the most dangerous one yet. Then movement, a glint, a reflection from metal directly in her line of sight. A sniper reappearing, taking aim. Lena's heart remained calm, but her mind raced. She had seconds, maybe less. She couldn't hesitate. She fired. The shot echoed across the canyon, merging with the wind's howl. The sniper jerked, disappeared. Dust and debris exploded around the rock. Silence. But Lena didn't exhale. Behind her, the sound of movement intensified. A coordinated force, moving with precision, closing fast. She realized the full scope of the ambush. She wasn't just facing snipers. She was being hunted from all sides. Every instinct screamed survival. Every breath, every heartbeat, every movement had to be calculated. One mistake, one slip, one misjudgment, and she wouldn't survive. The canyon stretched endlessly, shadows shifting, glimmers flashing, death lurking in every crevice. And Lena knew, with absolute clarity, that the real battle had just begun. She had fired the shot she shouldn't have taken, and now the mountain was coming alive against her. The ridge beneath Lena's boots seemed to twist and stretch with every step, a jagged labyrinth carved by wind and time. Her hands burned from gripping the rifle, her gloves shredded, dust embedded into every scrape and cut. She paused, pressing herself flat against a boulder, listening. The mountain whispered danger in the hiss of the wind, the shifting gravel, the faint rustle of movement across the canyon. She had neutralized the immediate sniper threats, but now the full scale of the ambush became horrifyingly clear. The enemy wasn't just defending a target, they had planned for her. Every ridge, every shadow, every slope had been mapped to trap her, and someone knew her tactics. Someone knew her. Footsteps, soft, coordinated, deadly, echoed along a distant ledge. Not one, but multiple hunters. They weren't snipers anymore. They were elite, experienced, tracking her with military precision. She had underestimated the depth of their operation. Now the mission was no longer about a shot, it was about survival. Lena pressed her body lower, sand and grit grinding against her knees. The wind cut sharply across her face, stinging her eyes, forcing her to blink. She adjusted the scope on her rifle, calculating angles, wind, elevation, and distance. The target lay deep within the canyon, obscured by ridges and outcrops, yet the hunters were moving like predators closing in on prey. She inched sideways along a narrow ledge, boots slipping slightly on loose gravel, every movement deliberate. Her mind raced through contingencies, escape routes, firing positions, the possibility of reinforcements, none of which were accessible. She was alone. Command had gone silent. She was on her own. Then she saw it, a shadow shifting unnaturally along a ridge opposite her. A sniper or a spotter. Either way, they had the advantage. High ground, a clear view, and a coordinated strategy. Lena exhaled slowly, pressing herself closer to the rock. The wind howled, masking sound and scent, but also threatening to betray her movements with every step. She crawled forward, sliding along a narrow ledge, dust and gravel tumbling behind her. Every instinct told her to move quickly, but speed would make noise. Patience, precision, stealth, that was her mantra. Ahead, a small outcrop offered a temporary perch with a clear line of sight down the canyon. Lena set her bipod, resting her rifle carefully, scanning the terrain. Another glimmer flashed across her scope. The sniper had moved again, adjusting for wind, readying another shot. Her pulse was steady, but adrenaline coursed through her veins. The canyon was no longer just a battlefield. It was a maze of death, each ridge hiding unseen enemies. Her first sniper had been dispatched, the second displaced, yet now the hunters were converging, closing in with terrifying efficiency. A faint rustle behind her made her pivot sharply. Footsteps, plural, descending along a ledge she hadn't noticed. She froze, chest tight, senses heightened. The enemy had flanked her. She had expected opposition from the front, but now the canyon itself seemed to conspire against her, pushing her toward a trap. Lena pressed herself against the boulder, calculating. There was only one narrow path upward, a vertical climb that most soldiers would hesitate to attempt. Impossible, perhaps, but survival demanded it. She removed her pack, slinging her rifle forward, and began the ascent. Hand over hand, fingers digging into jagged stone. The climb was brutal. The rock cut through gloves, drew blood, left abrasions that screamed with every movement. Yet Lena climbed, higher and higher, until the ledge offered a precarious perch. Below she could hear the enemy's footsteps. They were close now. The whisper of movement, the shifting of rocks, the subtle echo of boots against stone. It was a symphony of impending danger. She crouched low, breath steady, rifle trained across the canyon. A glimmer flashed across her scope again. Another sniper, re-emerging, repositioning, taking aim. Lena exhaled, squeezing the trigger. The rifle barked, echoing off the canyon walls. The enemy jerked violently, disappearing behind cover. Silence, too perfect. Lena's instincts screamed more were coming. She adjusted her rifle, scanning the ridge lines. Shadows moved subtly but deliberately. The enemy was coordinated. They had predicted her movements, mapped her path, and now the trap was fully sprung. The climb had bought her a temporary advantage, a higher vantage point, but it had also exposed her to other threats. Footsteps echoed from above, from flanking ridges. The canyon seemed alive, every ridge hiding a potential sniper, every shadow a threat. Lena shifted slightly, adjusting her position along the ledge. She had to reach the target, take the shot, and survive. But the enemy's coordination was unnerving. They weren't just skilled, they were studying her, predicting her. A flash of metal caught her eye, a sniper barrel protruding from a rock crevice across the canyon, already aimed at her heart. Lena froze, her pulse steady, every muscle tensed. She knew that one misstep, one twitch could be fatal. She exhaled slowly, steadying her rifle. There was no time for hesitation. The first shot had been taken. Now it was a matter of survival. She adjusted her aim, accounting for wind, distance, and elevation. Every calculation had to be precise. The sniper fired. The bullet tore into the rock beside her, sending chips and dust flying. Lena rolled instinctively, narrowly avoiding the impact. She pressed herself lower, scanning for another firing position. The canyon floor echoed with movement. She could hear multiple sets of footsteps converging, not snipers now, but elite ground forces, trained soldiers, closing in, hunting her. The mountain that had been her route to the target was now a gauntlet. Every ridge, every ledge, every shadow held danger. Lena's mind raced. She had to survive. She had to reach the target. She had to finish the mission. Her eyes caught another glimmer, a sniper repositioning again, calculating, taking aim. Lena fired first. The shot cracked across the canyon, echoing violently, and the enemy jerked violently before vanishing behind a boulder. But it was clear. The mountain was crawling with hunters. She had no time to rest. Every second counted. Every movement was a gamble. The wind howled, buffeting her face, carrying dust and grit. Lena pressed herself lower, moving along the ledge with careful precision. She had to reach a new vantage point, somewhere she could take the shot on the target. Below, the enemy's movement intensified. They were closing the net. The canyon had become a trap, each ridge and crevice a potential death sentence. Lena's training, her instincts, her lethal precision were her only allies. She climbed higher, finding a narrow perch that offered a line of sight down the canyon. Kneeling, she adjusted her scope, breath steady, fingers tight on the rifle. The hunters below were close, coordinating, closing in. The mountain itself seemed to conspire against her. She exhaled, eyes narrowing. The first shot had been fired. The ambush was in full effect. Survival depended on precision, patience, and nerves of steel. And Lena Ward, the quiet woman who had stepped forward when no one else would, was ready. Because in the canyon, only one could emerge alive, and Lena was determined it would be her. The canyon stretched endlessly, jagged ridges and shadowed crevices forming a maze of death. Lena pressed herself against a narrow ledge, her rifle resting lightly in her hands, eyes scanning every glimmer, every shadow. Below, the enemy's movements grew more coordinated. Not just snipers now, but elite ground forces, soldiers trained to track, hunt, and kill with surgical precision. They were closing in. Her body ached. Cuts and scrapes from the rocks throbbed, her gloves shredded, blood drying in the harsh desert wind. Yet her pulse remained steady, every breath controlled, every muscle coiled like a spring. Survival demanded focus. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She calculated her next move. The ridge she was on offered height but little cover. Every second she remained there increased the risk of being flanked, pinned, or eliminated. Below, a shadow flickered, a sniper adjusting their position. Lena adjusted her scope, calculating wind, distance, and mirage. 2,000 meters. Impossible, but not for her. She fired. The shot cracked, echoing violently across the canyon. Dust and rock exploded around the sniper's position. A flicker of movement confirmed the hit. But before she could exhale, a second sniper emerged from a nearby ridge, aiming directly at her. Lena rolled instinctively behind a jagged boulder, dust clouding her vision. The canyon was alive with danger. Every ridge held a hidden enemy, every shadow a threat. She had to move. Waiting would mean death. She scanned her options. A narrow path climbed higher along the ridge, offering a precarious but potentially advantageous perch. She had to take it. Slowly, deliberately, she began the ascent, each handhold calculated, every step measured. Loose gravel tumbled below, a whisper of her movement to the enemy. Halfway up, a sharp whistle split the air. A bullet tore past her shoulder, missing by inches. Lena froze, calculating trajectory, origin, and angle. Another sniper closer than she thought. She adjusted, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. Another crack of the rifle echoed. The enemy jerked violently behind cover. Lena didn't pause. Every second counted. The canyon had become a war of patience, precision, and nerves. Higher she climbed, finally reaching a jagged outcrop that offered a line of sight down the canyon. Kneeling, she adjusted her rifle, scanning for targets. Her eyes caught movement, footsteps coordinating below, shadows shifting with lethal intent. They were closing the net. Suddenly, a flash to her right. A soldier attempting to flank her, moving with silent precision along a narrow ledge. Lena tracked him through her scope. One shot, precision, controlled, she fired. The figure dropped and dust and rocks tumbled down the canyon. Silence returned, broken only by the wind, but Lena knew it wouldn't last. More were coming. She exhaled, scanning, calculating. She was alone, no support, no backup. Command had gone dark, yet her training, her instincts, and her resolve were her allies. Survival depended on every calculation, every decision, every shot. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying dust into her eyes. She wiped it away, adjusting her scope for the mirage effect. A shadow flickered across the canyon floor, a sniper repositioning, closer, more aggressive. Lena's pulse remained steady. She adjusted her aim, calculating distance, wind, and drop. She fired. The shot cracked, echoing violently. The sniper jerked violently, disappearing behind a boulder. Lena didn't exhale. She had learned long ago that silence could be the calm before the storm. Then came a new sound, a coordinated movement from above, along the ridges. elite forces, multiple lines of fire converging, closing in. Lena realized the full scope of the ambush. The enemy had anticipated her every move, predicting her ascent, her firing positions, and her likely paths. She pressed herself against the rock, scanning rapidly. There were multiple threats now, converging from all directions. Her only advantage: patience, precision, and unpredictability. She needed a plan, a single line of escape or attack. The ridge offered one narrow path upward, but it was risky. Too slow, and the hunters below would reach her. Too fast, and she risked exposure. Lena exhaled, steadying her rifle. She calculated wind, distance, angle, enemy position. One shot, one move, one chance. She fired. The sniper below jerked violently, then slid down the rocks, neutralized. But another emerged, closer, faster, more aggressive. Lena adjusted, fire, crack, another hit. The canyon had become a deadly chessboard. Every move she made had to be calculated, precise, and lethal. Her body burned with fatigue, muscles screaming, but she didn't falter. Every instinct, every ounce of training guided her. She climbed higher, reaching the peak of the ridge. From this vantage, she could see the full canyon below, the enemy converging, positions shifting, lines tightening. The target lay at the base, heavily guarded, nearly impossible to reach without exposure. Lena exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. She had survived sniper fire, ambushes, and flanking maneuvers. But the real challenge awaited. The target, deep within the canyon, behind layers of ridges and enemy forces, and the mountain itself seemed to conspire against her. She adjusted her rifle, calculating one final shot. Every variable accounted for: wind, mirage, distance, elevation, human error. She exhaled, finger tight on the trigger. Then a glimmer, a reflection from the target's location. She sighted carefully, adjusted for the unpredictable gusts, and fired. The shot echoed violently, reverberating across the canyon. The target jerked violently, falling to the canyon floor. Silence descended, broken only by the howl of the wind. Lena pressed herself against the rock, scanning rapidly. No movement, no sign of life. But the victory was incomplete. She was alone, exhausted, surrounded by enemy forces, and the mountain still held secrets. Every shadow, every ridge, every glimmer could hide death. She had completed the shot, but the mission was far from over. Lena exhaled, muscles trembling from exertion. Blood and dust coated her hands and face. The canyon below was a maze of death, but she had survived, one shot at a time. And yet she knew instinctively, the hunters were still out there. The mountain was still alive. The mission was not over. She adjusted her scope, scanning, calculating, breathing steady. Every movement from this point on would determine survival. Every decision would carry the weight of life and death. Lena Ward, quiet, precise, deadly, had faced impossible odds, and she would continue. Because in the canyon only one could survive, and she intended it would be her. The canyon was a tomb of shifting shadows and jagged stone. Lena pressed herself flat against the ridge, scanning the terrain with eyes that had become accustomed to every glimmer, every subtle movement. Below, the target lay neutralized, but the enemy forces remained alive, their numbers daunting, their coordination precise. She had survived sniper fire, ambushes, and flanking maneuvers, but the hardest part was yet to come: extraction. Her earpiece crackled to life for the first time in hours. "Ward status," a voice strained, urgent. "Extraction ETA 10 minutes, hold position." "Copy," Lena replied softly, voice steady, betraying none of the fatigue or tension coursing through her body. She exhaled, adjusting her grip on the rifle. 10 minutes. That was all she had. 10 minutes to survive against elite forces closing in from every ridge and every shadow. The wind howled, carrying the scent of dust and the faint tang of blood. Lena wiped her eyes, scanning. Movement rapid, coordinated on the opposite ridge. More enemy reinforcements. They had not expected her to eliminate the target so decisively. and now they were reacting. She pressed herself lower, sliding along the ledge. Every movement had to be deliberate, silent, precise. One slip, one exposed hand, one misjudged angle, and it could be her last. Her eyes caught a flash, a reflection from a scope far below. A sniper. She couldn't see him fully, couldn't estimate distance perfectly, but instinct told her the threat was imminent. She adjusted her aim, calculated wind and elevation, and fired. The rifle cracked, the glimmer vanished. A brief silence followed, deceptive and dangerous. Lena's pulse remained calm, but her senses screamed. The canyon seemed alive, every shadow a potential threat. Her extraction point was on the far ridge, across open terrain with no cover. She had to move, and every second would be a gamble. She crouched low, surveying a narrow path along the ridge that could provide partial cover. The enemy was closing in, moving like predators toward a cornered animal. Lena had no choice. She had to run. Muscles burning, she began her ascent along the path. Loose gravel skidded beneath her boots, stones clattering down the mountainside. Bullets tore past, kicking up dust, some too close for comfort. Lena didn't falter. Each step, each movement, each breath was controlled, precise. She had survived far worse. Halfway to the extraction point, a sniper fired from a perpendicular ridge. The bullet struck the rock beside her with a violent crack, sending sparks and dust flying. Lena dove to the side, rolling into a narrow crevice. She peered through the scope, spotting the sniper's outline. One shot, precision, controlled, she fired. The sniper jerked violently and slid down the ridge. Silence, too complete. Her instincts screamed more were coming. She pressed on, moving along a treacherous ledge that offered a line of sight toward the extraction point. The enemy below had adapted. They were using coordinated suppressive fire to pin her down, trying to force her into the open. Lena moved with calculated patience, timing each step between bursts of gunfire, every motion synchronized with the wind and terrain. Then a sudden movement. A figure emerged from the canyon floor, advancing toward her with lethal intent. Not a sniper, not a scout, an elite operative heavily armed, moving fast and precise. Lena's pulse didn't quicken. Her body coiled, muscles tensed, mind calculating the only options. The operative fired. Lena rolled behind a boulder, a fragment of rock splintering near her head. She returned fire, calculating trajectory, elevation, and wind. The shot hit and the figure went down, but it was only one of many. Above, another sniper readjusted, aiming carefully, calculating her exposure. Lena fired first. The shot cracked across the canyon. Dust and rock erupted where the sniper had been, and silence returned, but fleeting, deceptive. Her eyes darted, footsteps along a ridge behind her. Another flanking maneuver. Lena pressed herself closer to the rock, scanning rapidly. The extraction point was now visible, a small clearing with dust swirling from rotor wash. 10 minutes had shrunk to less than 3. The wind carried more than dust, the faint sound of engines. Extraction was near, but so was death. The enemy was relentless, adapting, anticipating her every move. Lena exhaled, eyes narrowing. She had one chance to reach the point alive. Every shot she had taken, every maneuver had led to this moment. Survival required more than skill, it demanded audacity. She sprinted across the narrow ledge, boots skidding over loose gravel. Bullets tore past, kicking up clouds of dust, some narrowly missing. She rolled behind a jagged rock, scanning for a sniper perched above. A shadow flickered, scope glinting in the sun. She fired. The sniper jerked violently, disappearing behind cover. Ahead, the extraction point was only 50 meters away. Helicopter rotors whipped sand and dust into her face, visibility low. She could hear the enemy converging, coordinating, attempting to pin her down. Lena pressed forward, crawling under intermittent fire, muscles screaming, body straining, heart steady. A sniper from the far ridge fired. The bullet tore past her shoulder, knocking her off balance. Lena rolled, recalibrated, and fired. The sniper fell, neutralized. She scrambled to her feet, moving with desperation and precision, each step measured yet urgent. Bullets whistled past, kicking up dust, rocks, and debris. Her gloves were shredded, hands bleeding, vision partially obscured by grit, yet her focus never wavered. She reached the edge of the clearing. The helicopter hovered, blades churning the desert wind into a violent storm. The rope ladder swung, a lifeline amid chaos. The enemy's fire intensified. Bullets struck rocks around her, sending shards flying. Lena didn't hesitate. She leapt, grabbing the ladder. The rotors buffeted her, wind and debris lashing against her face. She climbed, muscles burning, adrenaline surging. The helicopter lifted, climbing higher, but enemy fire continued. Bullets struck the hull, sparks flying. Lena glanced down, scanning the canyon. The enemy's forces were numerous, coordinated, and deadly, but she had survived. Inside the helicopter, she collapsed, chest heaving, blood and dust coating her face and gloves. Extraction was complete, but the canyon below was still a war zone. She had survived snipers, ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and the mountain itself. The pilot glanced at her, respect and concern in his eyes. "You okay?" Lena exhaled, voice steady despite exhaustion. "Never better." But in her mind, the canyon still held secrets. Every shadow, every ridge, every glimmer of metal, it had been alive with danger. And though she had survived, she knew instinctively. The enemy was still out there, watching, planning, waiting. Lena Ward, quiet, deadly, precise, had survived impossible odds. But the mission, the hunt, and the mountain secrets were far from over. And as the helicopter lifted into the sky, carrying her away from the canyon, Lena's eyes narrowed. Somewhere below, in the jagged shadows of the mountain, danger still waited. She had survived, but the war was not yet done. The helicopter banked sharply, climbing higher into the fading light of the desert afternoon. Dust and debris whipped against Lena's face, stinging her eyes, but she didn't blink, not fully. Her vision had been trained for moments like this, scanning, calculating, anticipating. Below, the canyon stretched like a jagged wound in the earth, shadows deepening, rocks jagged and blackened from previous firefights. Lena sat, rifle across her lap, muscles trembling from the relentless climb, the firefights, and the unending adrenaline. Sweat, blood, and grit coated her body. Her gloves were shredded, hands raw, but she felt alive, exhilarated. Every heartbeat, every calculated movement, every precise shot had led her here. Yet even in this brief reprieve, instinct screamed. The canyon wasn't silent, not really. Somewhere in those shadows, enemies still lurked. They were alive, they were watching, and they were learning. Her calm crackled. "Ward, you're clear. Repeat, you're clear. Good work. Extraction complete." She exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. Clear. Extraction complete. The tension that had gripped her shoulders for hours eased slightly, but not completely. Because she knew better. The canyon had revealed its secrets. Every ridge, every shadow, every glimmer of metal had been a potential death sentence. She had survived impossible odds. She had eliminated snipers, outmaneuvered elite soldiers, and faced flanking maneuvers that would have frozen lesser operatives in place. Yet the mountain's whispers still lingered in her mind. The helicopter leveled, moving toward the rendezvous point at the edge of the desert. Lena's eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the horizon. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a hunter. Every move had been calculated, every shot precise. Every instinct had guided her through a labyrinth designed to kill. She allowed herself a brief memory of the moments that had nearly ended her life. The sniper whose scope had glimmered in the sun, the elite operative closing in with lethal intent, the flanking soldiers whose presence had nearly pinned her to the rock face. Each one had been a puzzle. Each one now, a testament to her skill and determination. The radio crackled again. "Ward, the intel was confirmed. Target eliminated. Mission success." She didn't respond immediately. Success was a fleeting word in a world like this. The adrenaline hadn't fully drained, the threat hadn't fully disappeared, and the canyon had taught her a lesson she would never forget. The battlefield doesn't forgive mistakes. But she had made none. Lena's mind replayed the shots, the calculations, the wind adjustments, the mirage estimations. Each decision had been razor-sharp, each shot a balance of patience and precision. The target had been neutralized, the snipers eliminated, yet survival had depended on more than just skill. It had required instinct, courage, and an unwavering calm under pressure. The helicopter banked again, the rotor wash lifting sand into the air, obscuring the view of the canyon below. Lena adjusted the rifle across her lap, scanning one last time. Every shadow, every ridge, every jagged crevice, she cataloged them all in her mind. A mental map of the battlefield she had survived, a map she would carry forever. A sudden flicker caught her eye. Across the canyon's edge, far below, a shadow moved, swift, deliberate, calculated. Not a threat, not yet, but a reminder. The canyon had been a crucible, and those who survived its fire were forever changed. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The helicopter climbed higher, leaving the canyon behind, carrying her away from the chaos, from the death, from the shadows that had hunted her relentlessly. And yet deep in her mind a singular truth remained. The canyon had tried to claim her. It had thrown every lethal obstacle at her, every ambush, every sniper, every flanking maneuver. And she had survived, alone, precise, deadly. The radio crackled one final time. "Welcome back, Ward. Debrief in 2 hours." She didn't respond. Not yet. She needed a moment, a breath, a pause. The adrenaline had not fully subsided. Her hands, though bloodied and raw, still held the rifle as if it were an extension of her own body. She could have faced the mountain's fury again and again and still emerged alive. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. Lena sat back, gaze fixed on the fading light, muscles still coiled, mind still sharp. She had stepped forward when no one else would. She had faced impossible odds, survived ambushes, and eliminated a high-value target with precision that few could match. She allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile, not relief, not triumph, but acknowledgement of what she had done. Because out there in the jagged labyrinth of the canyon, she had been unstoppable. She had been precise. She had been a ghost. The wind whispered through the helicopter, carrying the scent of the canyon, of dust and blood and gunpowder. Lena closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the memory of every heartbeat, every calculated move, every lethal shot wash over her. When she opened them again, she was ready, not just for debriefing, not just for the next mission, but for anything. Because survival, she knew, was never just about the mission. It was about precision, patience, and the unyielding courage to step forward when no one else would. The helicopter's rotors chopped through the silence, carrying her toward safety. Yet Lena's mind lingered in the canyon, every shadow, every ridge, every flicker of metal etched into her memory. She was Ward, Lena Ward, quiet, precise, deadly. And the canyon would never forget the ghost who had walked its jagged paths and emerged alive. The sun disappeared entirely, leaving a sky of deep purple and gold. Lena looked out over the horizon, eyes sharp, pulse steady. The mission was complete, but the legend had only begun. She had faced death, outmaneuvered the impossible, and emerged unbroken. The canyon was conquered, but Lena Ward remained a ghost.